Well, our ministry, as has been mentioned, is furlough replacement. It is our goal. And you have to understand, in all of those years growing up, my father taught us that missionaries were our heroes. And in all of those years of pastoring, that was just driven home. And I'll tell you, the last 10 years of being in missions work has not decreased that opinion at all. And you say, but you are missionaries. It doesn't feel like it. But you know what? We're delighted to be here. This is the first missions conference we have been in like 4 years. Can you believe that? And so we're just delighted to be a part of things. Thanks for inviting us. Our ministry is to go and fill in for pastors when they need to come back to the States, either to report to their churches or maybe for medical reasons, or sometimes they're emergency things, although we don't get to do that much anymore because we're scheduled so solidly. But our mission is to go and to overlap with them for a few days, meet their people, and learn during that time where to eat, where not to eat, how to drive, how to greet people, how not to greet people, and all of those things that you need to know culturally. Not all of them, just enough that we don't, get ourselves killed by a mob with pitchforks. And so what we do is we go, and when he leaves, we love their people. It's neat because we kind of come in like a grandma and a grandpa and just love the people. And if a problem comes up, we try to handle it, or we call the missionary and say, what should we do? And they tell us what to do. Or sometimes they say, just wait, I'll take care of that when I come back. And we're like, whew, but in any case, what we try to do is to love those people and to teach those people and encourage those people to such a degree that that church grows not only numerically, but also in depth and understanding and love for God, so that when those missionaries come back, we turn it back over to them a little bigger, a little stronger, and this is important, ready to follow them on that next leg of that church planting journey. And we have found that because we actually have no skin in the game. Do you understand what I mean by that? We don't get any money from that church. We don't have any future in that church. We just come in and love the people, and they understand that. And so because of that, we can teach a whole lot of things that sometimes missionaries and pastors are a little bit nervous about teaching, like giving, tithing, and about pastoral authority. And a lot of things that makes pastors a little bit nervous, we can teach that and show them from the Word of God, this is the way it needs to be. And this is how you should respect your pastor. And this is how you should love the Lord. And so because of that, in the 16 fill-ins that we've done over these last few years, the Lord, and it's only by the grace of God, the Lord has blessed and given us the ability to turn over that church back to the missionary a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger, and once again, ready to follow that missionary on that next leg of the journey. Now, we're going to show you a video, and after that, we're going to have a little bit of time for questions, and then I'm going to tell you some mission stories. But please understand that we redid this video about a month ago, and it's already obsolete because COVID does that to us, doesn't it? We've had several fill-ins canceled during this last year. And so it's going to say, hey, we are off to Budapest to fill in for Zoli Kish. Please understand, we're not. That's actually being postponed 1 year. And when it says, then we're going to Najkanisha to fill in for Gideon and Yoliola, understand that we've squeezed that one down and we're squeezing in Budapest and that's a back-to-back. And so now you know the changes, and you'll understand as the video goes on. But it's only 4 minutes, but if you have any questions, we'll answer them afterwards. So let's go ahead and take a look at that video now, shall we? This is a quick ministry update video from Jim and Myra Wright, your furlough replacement missionaries with Baptist World Missions.
2020 was a strange year. After having to cancel our spring fill-in to Budapest and our summer replacement to Vancouver due to COVID, we were delighted to be able to keep our fall fill-in for the Olas in Nagykanizsa, Hungary.
Even that was truly a miracle. After being denied boarding by the airlines on the first attempt, we returned to O'Hare 3 days later with additional paperwork only to be turned down again. To make a long story short, God led us to the right people in Chicago, Istanbul, and Budapest so that we could get in and minister without any tests or quarantines.
Our time in Nagykanizsa, Hungary was shorter than the normal fill-in, but oh so full. You would think that the country being in lockdown would hinder the ministry, but I don't think it even slowed it down.
In addition to preaching all of the services for the Olas in Nagykanizsa, we had Bible studies, adult fellowships, children's ministries, much counseling, many home visits, and also preached for 2 other Hungarian churches.
A reporter from the regional newspaper was intrigued by our ministry and interviewed us. His editor liked the article and put it on the entire front page of the weekend section of our Saturday paper. In it, we were able to share an explanation of our ministry, opinions on COVID and American politics, our love for Hungarian food, culture, and the people.
But most significantly, the reporter faithfully conveyed our recommendation of the Lighthouse Baptist Church and our explanation of salvation. The church people all reported that it was a great and well-used opportunity that God had given.
Our next replacement is to the 3rd district of Budapest called Óbuda, Hungary.
This will be our first non-Baptist world replacement. The missionary there is a national that we consider to be one of our sons, as we first met him when he was a young teenager. We have watched as Zoli Kish has grown up, gone to university, married a pastor's daughter, started the church in Óbuda, taken many master's classes from Dr. David Potter, and is currently completing his Doctor of Ministry from Maranatha.
The Living Waters Baptist Church of Óbuda is still small, but has already demonstrated a desire to reach their district with the gospel of Jesus Christ.
In June, after completing our work in Budapest, we are scheduled to fly directly to Tirana, Albania for 4 months, filling in for Mike and Jennifer Fiocchi. Their ministry in a couple of church plants bridges the gap from first to third world cultures.
Then, in September of 2021, we are scheduled to fly directly from Albania to Germany to fill in for Don and Jill Vanderhoof through December. That will complete our first back-to-back-to-back replacements.
After our return from Nideggen, Germany in December, our 2022 is scheduled with 3 months in Nagykanizsa, Hungary, and then back-to-back fill-ins in Wrexham, Wales, and Edinburgh, Scotland, and then in 2023, 2 fill-ins in Ireland.
Right now, we are booked solidly until 2024. We accept every one that we can, but unfortunately, for every request that we can accept, our full schedule makes us turn down several.
We would like to thank you for upholding us in prayer. May God bless as, through prayer, we strive shoulder to shoulder in this needed ministry.
All right. Another thing that makes that video obsolete is we managed to somehow squeeze in another replacement to Vancouver to replace the fact that we weren't able to go this last summer. And so we are going to be, Lord willing, in Dublin, Ireland for 3 months. Then we have to get out for 3 months, and then we come back for 3 months in order to not have to get a visa. And so Brother Hammermeister in Vancouver said, "Hey, can you come during those 3 months?" And we said, yes. And so we're going to be in Vancouver, Lord willing, in the summer of 2023. And so we're looking forward to that. Anyway, that is an update on the video, where we've been, where we are going. For those of you who don't know where we've been, the Lord has taken us all over the place, from South Africa to Cameroon to a bunch of different places in Europe and the UK, 2 places in Canada, 1 in the States, 2 places over in Korea. And so we have quite a few stamps in our passport. In any case, are there any questions that we could answer for you this evening? Yes, sir.
So is your typical duration 3 months? Is that your schedule? Do you usually go 3 months at a time to each place?
Most countries will let us in for 3 months without a visa. Some countries will let us go in, like Korea. You can go for 3 months and then jump over the border and jump back in, and you get another 3 months. Some are that way. Any of them in the Schengen zone of Europe, you have to be gone for 3 months before you can come back for another 3 months. It changes everywhere. So Albania, we're going there, and we're going to be there for a whole 6 months, and we're looking forward to that. We've been in Cameroon we were in Cameroon for 8 months, but man, we had to fight tooth and nail, and especially when they're expecting a bribe and we ain't giving them one. That was rough staying there for 8 months, but it changes. We've been places as long as 8 months and as short as a month, and so that it really changes. I would say our average is 3 months, and that does seem to be a very workable. But a lot of missionaries need to be gone longer, so we're trying to team up with other furlough replacement missionaries to help out with that, and hoping we can make that workable. So, yes, indeed. Good question. Any others? Yes, sir.
When you do transition into a ministry, do you often find that people will leave the ministry or leave that ministry there, or do most of them stay? How does it work?
We don't have many leave. You mean people in the church? We come and they say, "Oh, I'm taking this opportunity to get out of here."
Yeah.
No. For the most part, we don't. When you come into a new situation, particularly when you can't pronounce these people's names, there are some people who may be fringe that maybe we don't really know if they're there or not. But as far as the core or the regular attenders, no, we don't lose those. Oh, yes. Well, one of the things that we do to help with attendance is when we first get there, we take pictures of everybody. We give them pieces of paper, tell them, write your name on there, hold it up, click, and we do this for prayer because I'm a visual prayer. I look at pictures. A couple times a week, I look at a picture of your pastor and go, "Oh, I need to pray for him." And so, that we do that. But then also, a lot of times in a lot of churches, we on Sunday morning, we just before the message, I say, "Okay, we're taking the attendance picture. Everybody, smile." Click, and then I send that to the missionary because just about every Monday, I call the missionary and give them a report on how the Sunday went. It's their church. I consider myself their assistant pastor. They need to know. That way they look at the picture and they say, "Oh, where's brother so-and-so? Where's sister so-and-so?" And I say, "I don't know. Let's go pay them a visit." And we do. And we don't lose many. We don't lose many. And I'm not sure why. What's that? Oh yeah, and we do gain, and people are saved, and churches grow, and it's weird, but we love it. We love it. Good. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Oh yeah, about half of our ministries are in other languages, and so yes, we have interpreters, and I have fun with my interpreters. Did you see the picture of? And I was standing there giving an illustration, and I had a guy right across from me, and he got this big smile on his face, and I was giving an illustration about playing football, and I was talking about how I would come off the line and plaster him, and he was just laughing, but as I'm doing that, and I make noises like a grunt, I look over at my interpreter, and I expect her to grunt too, and it's fun. And I've heard a lot of people complain about interpreters, but I don't view it that way. And I've heard people say, "Well, I don't trust them." If God can trust me, and besides, it's not my message, it's God's message. And if they mess it up, that's God's thing. It does bring up some interesting things. One time I was talking about ancient mariners letting a rowboat down into the ocean. It's the middle of a funeral service. And Koreans can't hear the difference between O and Ah. And so he didn't hear rowboat, he heard robot. And he faithfully went and translated that those ancient mariners would put a mechanical automaton down in that water. And I could see I just lost everybody, you know. But so it's fun. But you know, I have found that collaboration, that teamwork, is a beneficial thing. Not only is there a discipling element there, because I send them my message a week in advance, they go over it, they check to make sure all of the translation of that verse is what we're expecting, and sometimes in other versions, Proverbs, all of the verses are shifted one, because a lot of other translations in other lands have that heading, a hymn of David on Sugaroth or whatever it is, that's verse 1. So everything is shifted down. So they have to go through and make sure that everything is lined up. And then we talk over any doctrine, any difficult concepts, anything that needs to get across. We discuss that. And so there's a lot of discipling that goes on in that as well. So I love it. I love working with interpreters. Outside, in stores, shopping, we don't have interpreters. There we just wing it. And that's fun too. 5 times it took Myra to come home with butter. We had a lot of lard. A lot of lard. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
A tele-request. If you could explain your relationship with Luke Love and give us an update on what he's up to.
Okay, Luke Love is Myra's sister's son. So he's our nephew. And he's pastoring in West Bend, Wisconsin. Yeah, and doing very well from what I understand. Was that all of the question?
That was.
Oh, is it? Okay, all right, very good. Yep, we get in touch with him occasionally. Good kid. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am?
Do you have trouble with the food?
No, you just eat it. It very seldom fights back. Yeah, you know, there are God has blessed us with the adventurous spirit when it comes to food, and you know, even in Korea with the octopus and squid, we didn't really learn to like it, except for the candied squid. If you ever get a chance to eat candied squid, it's good. But you know, but Korean food is great. The bulgogi and bibimbap and the kimbap and a whole lot of bops over there. And it means rice, logically. In any case, and Korea has good food. Hungary has the best food in the world as far as we're concerned. There's places where the food is less good, the UK. And in Cameroon, it wasn't that the food was bad, it's just that there was no good food. No, seriously. Those people are so dirt poor, you know, their idea of really splurging and, you know, putting on the dog was putting on the dog. And so, you know, even in Cameroon, we learned the ways to get around things. We would always take one of our sons, you know, the nationals, that we have a way of collecting young men. I don't know how it happens, but they like Myra's cooking and they like my fathering. And so, but we would take one of them with us, and, you know, we would walk into this hut with a perfectly clean dirt floor. Now, you don't understand how a dirt floor can be clean until you've walked into some of those places, but it really is nice. And they have you sit down at a low table, and they bring out the food, and it may be good and it may not be. But if it isn't, you take it and you take a big helping and you have some and you comment on how good it is and why you think it's good, and you always find something good about it. And then you look at your son and you say, "Are you hungry?" And he says, "Oh, I'm famished, Papa. Here, have some," you know. And the host and hostess are happy, and we're happy. All the world's happy. So there's always ways around things. And frankly, a lot of times you just need to, eat it. So, yeah, any other questions? Yes, sir.
Two things. One, with COVID, some of our missionaries have stated that people look at the foreigners, the Americans, as bringing COVID to their country. Co-op said something about that. Has that been an issue for you where they look down upon you? And then secondly, do you have problems with people coming in saying, hey, I watched this on YouTube, I think you're wrong here, and if so, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, okay. To answer the first question, first part of it, first, we've only been to one place since COVID hit, and that was Hungary. And no, they didn't blame Americans for that. They blame China. Sheena. And so, no, we haven't had that problem. And frankly, let me just say this. A lot of times people say, oh, foreigners hate Americans. No, they don't. They hate America, but they don't hate Americans. And if you go in and you're smiling, and if you're, apologizing when you say something stupid or offend their culture or whatever, but if you're just going in open and honest and trying to make friends, it is amazing what they will forgive you for. And really, because we tip, a lot of Americans are very welcome. And so, we have money, and so they like us there. And so, that's an aspect of it. Yes?
In Korea, while we were there, that was true, but they have issues with the Americans now. But that's their...
Yeah, we've heard that has happened since we were there, not because we were there. And so, yeah, and yeah, once again, you have to understand that the Korean culture is all about saving face. And if they can blame someone else, they're going to do it. And I don't know why they don't blame, but in any case, so yes. Going back to that food thing, have you had balut?
No.
You haven't had balut? I haven't either. Not going there. Yeah, no. How many of you know what balut is? Okay, good question to ask your missionary afterwards. It kind of turns my stomach, so there you go. Balut, ask him. Balut. Anyway, yes. Second part of the question?
About YouTube?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's occasionally. Keep in mind, I'm old and have gray hair. And everywhere else in the world, that's respected. And so that's a big advantage for furlough replacement missionaries. I come in and speak with authority, and they believe me. And so there have been times, like for instance, South Africa, a guy came to me and told me that I was all wrong about, dispensationalism, and here I needed to listen to this guy, and I'll not mention his name because I don't want you Googling him, but a guy in Arizona. Anyway, yeah.
We were talking about him
We were just
today.
talking about
Anyway, okay. Yeah, I don't have much of a problem with that, but when I do, I want to strangle somebody. But I don't. Okay, any other questions? Yes, sir.
And kind of on that, what's the biggest obstacle you have when you go into a ministry and they're teaching? When you pick up and start something, what's your biggest obstacle with the people? Do they have like something from a past religion, or what's your biggest obstacle when you're trying to relate biblical truth to people in those countries?
Okay, that is a huge question, and it changes with every culture. It changes with every church. And when you go in, you got to talk with the missionary, and you got to sit at his feet and learn from him about the culture and where the pitfalls are, and then you need to go with that. And it changes everywhere. In Cameroon, it was tribalism, the witch doctor religion that had been morphed into the Pentecostal faith. Anyway, and then there's in Korea it was Confucianism and the foundational thinking. The foundational thinking here is the Judeo-Christian ethic. There it is Confucianism, which is really weird, and it so there's that. Sometimes it's culture, and there are times when you've got to battle with surface culture, and sometimes it's deeper culture. So it changes everywhere we go, so yeah. I'm sorry to give you a vague answer to a specific question, but that's huge, really huge. Okay, I know we got time for one more. Anybody? Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever feared for your life?
Yes. Yes. There have been times when we have been afraid, and some of them were in South Africa, some in Korea, some at McDonald's. But no, seriously, and I don't mean to make light of it. But for the most part, we have found that there are rules that if you follow, you can stay safe, for the most part. But then there's always that thing that you didn't expect and it falls outside the rules. And there are times when you're frightened. Let me just say, every single time we run up against one of those, I really feel that there is a whole bunch of angels here in the States going and saying, hey, wake up, pray for the rights. Yeah, wake up. Because it is amazing how there are some points at which you can see the disaster happening in front of you. You see the danger coming right at you, and then suddenly it's like the hand of God just kind of moves it aside. If God ever lays a missionary on your heart in a spur of the moment, realize that right there is an opportunity for you to minister in a foreign land. Okay? Get on it, because it didn't just happen. I really believe that the Spirit guides people to pray, and so do that. Okay, that's the end of our question time. If you have any other questions, my wife loves to answer questions. No, I do too. And so come talk to us afterwards. Let me just pick up. Can we take a look at that first PowerPoint? Do I have control of that? Okay, Pastor Eugene, good. When we were in Cameroon, we met a young man. His name was Eugene, and we referred to him as Pastor Eugene because he had, with the missionary there, Ben Sinclair, started a church up in Kumbu, and not Kumbu, Akum. Sorry, Akum. Kumbu, Akum. You don't care, but I do. It's Akum. And there he started a church. And am I doing something wrong? Okay, all right. Here's Pastor Eugene and his family. And 3 of those girls are his daughters. We don't know where the 4th one came from. And that little boy over there, just ignore him. He's not a part of the family. But in any case, this is Pastor Eugene there in the church there in Akum. And here he is getting ready to hand out some Bibles. You see the 2 young ladies sitting there on the front with big smiles. They are about to get a Bible. Now, you don't just give Cameroonians a Bible, because if you just give it to them, they don't value it. They will take it down to the marketplace and sell it. Instead, you make them work for it. And you give them a copy of John and Romans and a sheet of questions, and they have to come back, and there's a question from each chapter of John and Romans, and they have to come back with all those questions answered, and then you sit down with them, and every one of those questions funnels all of their attention towards Christ and salvation. And what happens is, at that point, oftentimes people either have been saved because of their reading the passages, or they come to that realization and get saved. If they put that work into it, then we give them a copy of the Bible. And that's what these young ladies had done. And Pastor Eugene is giving them a copy of the Bible. And you can see that they were delighted to have that, and they will treasure it. In this church, there were quite a wide demographic, but of course a lot of children. And this generation was coming up. And I had the privilege, and you say, "What are you wearing?" Hey, it's very fashionable in Akum these days. By the way, whenever we can, we honor their culture. Now, there's a lot of areas of their culture that we can't honor, But in clothes, we can. And besides, they're far more comfortable. And so that's what I'm wearing. Leave me alone. Afterwards, all the kids wanted a picture with Myra. And I don't think you can really see him, but there is a young man who is just to the, I guess it's the right of Myra, her left. And his name is Boris. And no, he's not Russian. His name is Boris, and he doesn't look like it in this picture, but he's actually 16 years old, and that was back in 2014. Pastor Eugene had to leave and flee from this church. Guess who's pastoring this church in Akum? It's Boris. And so we are thrilled. And he came up to us and he said, it is my goal, my ambition, my desire to be a pastor. And God has honored that. In any case, Pastor Eugene lived in Sabga, and he would drive that 45 minutes all the way over to Akum on Sundays. He would go there on Saturday and stay on Saturday night in the church and minister. But when the Civil War hit, the mountains right around Sabga were the place where the Ambazonians made their encampment, and that's where the government was attacking, and it was basically a battle zone. And the problem is that neither side had any compunctions about killing civilians. Matter of fact, both sides did. And so he took his family and he fled. And this is his family now. And they're living down in Kribe. Now, you can take the pastor out of one area and stick him in another, but you can't take the pastor out of the man. And so he is working there. Now, the problem is that he had to move from an English-speaking area to a French-speaking area. And that, by the way, is what the whole war is about, is language. And so he's there, and the problem is that the French-speaking people hate the Anglophones. And so he is finding it very, very difficult to minister there. Ben Sinclair is going to be going over there and working with Pastor Eugene and trying to build a church and then be able to turn it over to Pastor Eugene. But right now, it's very difficult for him to make a living. Well, the thing is, his living is painting, and he is a painter by trade. And the problem is that nobody wants to buy his paintings, and he doesn't. Over there, he can't sell them for much of anything. But I said, listen, send me a whole bunch of them and I'll try and sell them here and we'll send you the money. And so that's what we're doing. And if you'd like to go through and look at those, they're $20 a piece, and all that money goes to Pastor Eugene and his family. And you say, oh, how far is that going to go? Do you realize that in Cameroon, a Cameroonian family can live on $100 a month? And so, as you can see, it'll go a long ways. If you can help out, do. Don't take it from the love offering. These other missionaries need it as well. But if you would like to help with that, then go ahead and pick one of those up. And we don't take credit cards. So, in any case, that's Pastor Eugene. Help him out if you can. Let me tell you another missionary story about a young man by the name of... We don't have time for Christian. So we're going to jump ahead. Okay. Yeah, we're going to go straight to Augie. Can you move it to Augie? Oh, good man. Thank you, Carlton. All right. The very first time we went to Hungary, we were there just for 2.5 months, and after we'd been there for about a month and a half, we had another youth activity, and on that evening there was a couple of sisters that came out to that youth activity, and the one over here is Steph, short for Stephanie, and one over there is Augie, short for Agnes. But everyone just called her Augie. And so we sat down, and if you've got your Bibles, turn with me, if you will, to Galatians chapter 4. And let me show you what I showed them that evening. There were about, 12, 15 teenagers there. And I was working with an interpreter. The neat thing was that probably half of the teenagers there spoke enough English to understand me. And so here we've got these two visitors. I didn't know anything about them except for their names. And we sat down, we talked, and I sat in a circle, and I said, okay, let me tell you something. I said, my name is James. My father's name is James. We have had Jameses in our family all the way back to the Civil War. So when Myra and I had our first son, what did we call him? And they all smiled and said, James. I said, no, we named him Bob. And they also laughed. They thought I was joking. And I said, no, why would I give him my name? I don't know how he's going to turn out. I don't know if he's going to be a good child. I didn't know if he was going to grow up to be a good man. Why would I give him my name until I know how he's going to turn out? No, I wouldn't do that. And so I named him Bob. In Hungarian, Bob means bean, so they thought that was funny too. But and I'm looking at these teenagers now, and they're kind of looking at me like, I'm not sure I believe this, you know. And I would say, you know, and there were times when little Bob would come to me, and he would look up at me, and he would say, are you my father? And I would say, I don't know. We'll have to see how you turn out. Now I'm looking in those teenagers' faces, and they're getting angry with me. And I said, did I do that? No, I did not do that. I said, when that child was born, and they cleaned him up, and they wrapped him up, and they handed him to me, and I took him over and showed him to Myra, and together we said his name is James Loyal Wright. Loyal, Dad Cummins' his middle name. James Loyal Wright. I gave him my first name, his grandfather's middle name, and of course our surname. Why? Because as we looked into his face, we realized that he was our son and that he was our responsibility. And everything that he was and would become was largely dependent upon what kind of parents we were. And we took that responsibility willingly. Now, not all cultures are that way. Back during the Greek and Roman times, there were times when the fathers would do that very thing, and they would say, we'll have to wait and see how you turn out. And then at a later time, if they proved themselves worthy, they would be adopted. They would be given the name. But aren't you glad God doesn't do that to us? God does not do that to us. Here in Galatians chapter 4, it's talking about that very thing, about how the difference between, sons and slaves but he goes on, and I want you to take a look in verse 4. He says, but when the fullness of time was come, God sent forth his Son, made of a woman, made under the law, to redeem them that were under the law, that we might receive the adoption of sons. And because ye are sons, God hath sent forth the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Now, in America, that word Abba, we're not quite sure what that means. But the Hungarians knew exactly what that means. Because in Hungarian, when a little boy, and normally this is just used by little boys and little girls, and they see their father and they cry out, Appa, Appa. Unless it's their mother, and then it's Anya, Anya. They understood that this is a name that can really only be used by the actual children of the loving Father. And what he's saying here is that we, as God's children, have the right to come to him and to cry out, Daddy, because we are his children. And he knows us, and he claims us. And he looks into our face when we are saved, and he takes on the full responsibility for all that we are and all that we will become. And people say, oh, well, you have to be good enough to, earn your salvation or, keep your salvation. They don't understand what the Bible is teaching about how he is our daddy. Now, there were times, and I told the teenagers this. I said, there were times when my little boy, years old, just learning to talk. You know, and I would lay down on the bed and I would set him on my chest, and he would take those elbows, little bony little elbows, and stick them in my chest and put his hands in his face, and he would look at me, and I would say, "James, are you my son?" And he would say, "Yes." And I would say, "How long will you be my son?" And he would say, "Forever." And then I'd say, "James, do I love you?" And he would say, "Yes." And I'd say, "How long will I love you?" And he would say, "Forever." Because he is my son. You see, this is what God extends to us. This is what we are as his children. And as I explained that to these Hungarian teenagers, Augie jumped up and ran out. And I went out and looked after her, and I saw she was getting on her bike and riding off, and I thought, oh my, we'll never see her again. The next morning was Sunday morning, and Augie and Steph showed up. There was something different about Augie. She was smiling a little bit more. And they came back that night, and they came back the following Wednesday, and every Sunday and every Wednesday that we were there. And when Gideon came back, he called me a couple months later, and he said, "Oh, it is such a blessing to see how Augie is growing in the Lord." And I said, I had never had the opportunity to hear her testimony because I knew she was saved, because on the very last day that we were there, I made it a point of asking her point blank and saying, "Augie, if you were to die today and go to heaven, and God were to say, 'Why should I let you into my heaven?' would you have a Bible verse for that?" You see, on that evening, I had shared with them Romans 10:13, "For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved." No ifs, ands, or buts. This is a promise. He uses small words other than that, whosoever. He uses small words so that we can understand it, so that we can grasp it. We had shared Romans 10, 9 and 10, John 3:16. And I asked her, and I said, "Do you have a Bible reason why you could give to God and say, why he should let you into heaven?" And she got that big smile on her face, and she said yes. And then she started quoting in English Romans 10, 9 and 10, verse 13, John 3:16. And I realized, okay, she's got it. And then something caught our attention, and then we quick had to get a picture with her, and this is a picture of her on that evening, and we had to leave, and so Gideon said, "Have you ever heard her testimony?" And I said, "No," and she said, he said, "She came to a youth activity, and you said something about naming your son, and it just broke her heart. Because all of her life, her father had said, 'You can't know whether or not you are good enough to be a child of God. You can't know whether you are good enough to go to heaven.'" And as she was riding home on her bike that day, God broke her heart, and she realized that God is not a tyrant in heaven, but a father who has extended salvation to anyone who will receive it. And she stopped her bike, and right there beside the road, she prayed and gave her life to Jesus Christ. Now, but wait, there's more. Augie finished up high school, and 2 years later, we were actually there for her graduation, high school graduation. That was a neat day. And then she went off to university in Budapest, and she trained to be, of all things, an English teacher. And she was already fluent in English, and she speaks almost without an accent. It's amazing. And she got her bachelor's degree and came back to Nashkanisha and moved right into the church building. There's an apartment in the church building. She moved into that apartment, and she's kind of the office manager for the church there. She's ministering. And let me ask you, who do you suppose this last November was our interpreter? It was Augie. You see, what a blessing it is in furlough replacement to have been in it long enough now to see people who we have ministered to, even some that we've seen get saved. not only get saved, but get it and start to grow and to turn around and come back and even come to the point where they can stand beside you in ministry and be used of God to be a blessing. And here's the neat thing. Her ministry makes our ministry possible. What a blessing it is. We've only been in furlough replacement for 8 years now. 10 years. It'll be 10 years coming up in April. Time flies. And yet God has allowed us to see so many neat things. We've seen so many people get saved, and we've seen a lot of them mature and grow. And when we go back to these places, and we've been back to Nashkanisha 3 times now, been back to Page 3 times, been to a bunch of these places repeatedly. And the wonderful thing is we get to go back and pick up where we left off and continue the discipling and the disciple building in these people's lives. What a blessing it is. Let me just say, these folks are our heroes, and they should be your heroes as well. Kids, who are your heroes? Someone that can throw a piece of pig skin or drop a ball through a hoop? Oh, please. I tell you, our heroes ought to be eternal. They ought to be the ones who have heard the wisdom of God's call and said, Amen, Lord, here am I, send me. That's why it's such a blessing to us to be able to come along our heroes and to fill in for them and then be able to take what they've given us and give it right back to them a little bit better, a little bit stronger. That's our joy. That's what makes this ministry such a blessing to us. And we hope and pray, not only a blessing to you, but also a blessing to those missionaries and their churches. I've got a lot of other things to say, but our time is gone. Let me challenge you. If you're here tonight and you've never received Christ as your Savior, why not? Why not? Don't leave here without talking to someone and getting that straight. If you're here this evening, and you realize, wow, the Lord may be laying this thing on my heart. And maybe He doesn't want you to go off to Timbuktu. Maybe He just wants you to go to the neighbors next door. We rejoice in the fact that our neighbor got saved this last Sunday. Oh, that's another story. But the point is, wherever you are, you need to say, Lord, use me here. And if the Lord lays it on your heart to go someplace else as a full-time vocational missionary, don't fear it. It is the greatest life. The greatest joy. I didn't say it was easy, but life is hard. That's just everything about life. But I would challenge you. Don't be afraid of it. Say, here am I, Lord, send me.